Okay, let's try this again. All right. So anyway, I was saying that a lot of these foods are ones I do get at Walmart, but they're available other places as well. The whole peanuts I get at Publix, and those are a favorite of Blue Jays. I also am a big fan of suet nuggets, and there are a variety of different kinds of those. I like the ones that have mealworms in them. And you'll notice that I also get something that's called insect trail mix. And that is another food item that it's actually for chickens. So I get that from Chewy. But it does have mealworms in it. It also has things like grasshoppers, and the birds love it. And then here are some other things that are a part of my feeding repertoire. The porch deck and patio food is a no waste food, and there are other no waste foods you can get. They have peanuts and different nuts and seeds in them, but no shells. So they're great for if you are feeding on your deck, like the name indicates. It doesn't make a mess. Every bit of it is edible. I still find that the nut and berry food that I feed is more popular with my birds than the no waste. And the nut and berry is also a little more affordable than the no waste. Also, I'm a fan of the stacker ring feeders. Those are the circular disc you see there, and there's a variety of those. Again, the mealworm is the one I use the most, but they're good for something that you can just put up, and particularly if I'm going to be away for a couple of days, these are great. I do also use suet on a regular basis. I've got pictured here peanut suet, and again, birds they love nuts, peanuts, peanut butter flavored things. I often in the hotter months do go to a no melt suet, just because they last longer. This variety, when it gets hot, can start getting moldy pretty quickly. So, and you'll notice that I do have bark butter as well, which that is a food item that is very popular with the birds. So I definitely recommend that. I do also get a very large bag of black oil sunflower seed. I get this particular variety at Tractor Supply, but you can get black oil sunflower pretty much anywhere that you can buy bird food, but I get it's like a 40-pound bag for $20. And this is great for another question I get a lot from people is about the squirrels. And most people don't really love my answer to that. And a part of my answer to that is this black oil sunflower seed. So I feed the squirrels. I happily feed the squirrels. And the black oil sunflower seed is very affordable, and I can put a lot of it out. And I put it in feeders that are very accessible. And that does limit how much the squirrels get on my other feeders. So, what you feed can change with the seasons. I already kind of hit on that a little bit with like the suet. Suet is much more appreciated in the winter months when birds are really in need of some high energy food. The birds that you're feeding are going to change with the seasons, and so that may change what the foods are that you provide. For example, sparrows are here in the winter, but not so much in the summer. So that during the winter, I feed a lot more millet. Also, goldfinches. I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with American goldfinches are here in the winter, and they leave in the spring as spring arrives. And so for goldfinches, they will eat all the foods that I already showed you guys, but also you might consider adding thistle or Niger to your feeding repertoire during the time that they are here. And as we go through my slides, you'll see some pictures of goldfinches feeding. And I use a thistle sock, which those are pretty easy to use, and you can actually buy the socks already pre-filled and just put them up. So this is a part of my feeding stations. You'll see that this is actually a swing set that I repurposed and changed into bird feeders. So you'll notice that there's a platform here where the cardinal is, and that's one of the areas that I will put my black oil sunflower seeds so the squirrels can just climb right up and have what they want. And as a result, they do tend to leave my other feeders alone. You'll notice on the little house-shaped feeder there, if you look on the left-hand side, there is a male painted bunting, and hanging on to the hanger is the female above, and those are ones that come to the millet as well. You'll notice that I have different shaped feeders, and that's also another part of feeding. The more variety you have, not only in your foods, but also in your feeders and the areas that you're feeding will help bring in more birds. Here's another little section of my yard where I have these little octagonal feeders right here are some of my favorites. I have like 5 of those in my yard, and they're great because they're open and I can just pour food in. It does enable you to see the birds really easily. Also, a part of my routine, every morning I get up and I fill all my feeders, and I also empty out the feeders. So you don't want to let your feeders get old and moldy. You want to really put fresh, clean food on a regular basis. So with that octagonal feeder, I just dump it out and put new food in each morning. Usually by the time I do that, there's almost nothing left in it anyway, but that also puts food on the ground that the squirrels can get and prevents them from wanting to climb it. And you'll notice that, let's see, in this picture, I've got a Baltimore oriole, 2 yellow rump warblers, a cardinal, and a summer tanager. So pretty good variety there on just those 2 feeders. And this is another platform feeder, and you'll see that it's filled with black oil sunflower, and there we've got 2 cardinals and a rose-breasted grosbeak, which those tend to pass through when migrating, and if they find a good feeding spot, they might hang out for a while. So I usually get those for a couple of weeks out of the year. Now, this is a feeding station at a friend of mine's house, and I included this picture because he really made good use of natural branches as a part of his feeding station. And you'll notice when you look at this feeding station, he's got a platform, he's got cylindrical feeders, he's got jelly feeders. I forget what, he has some suet and just a variety of foods, and they're at different levels. So different birds are gonna feed at different levels. If you look in this picture, you can see there's a Carolina wren that's looking down. And then of course, the Baltimore oriole and the cardinal up on the platform there. And this is another part of that same feeding station. So there's suet and again, more natural branches. So I think that really does lend to the birds feeling really comfortable. That's another part of really getting your setup right is I think a lot of times people think what's going to be the most convenient for me to see the birds? And of course that makes sense because the point of us feeding is so that we can see and enjoy the birds. But I also encourage you to think about, what do the birds want? And what birds want is to feel secure and safe. And so when they look at your feeding station, if you have just a feeder out in the middle of an open yard, then that puts them at risk to predators that are passing through. And so they're going to be wary about going to those feeders, and you'll tend to get more birds that come and grab food and then move to a different location if that's what your setup is like. Or you might get some flock mentality type birds like common grackle, who will all just kind of descend upon it. And those birds rely on the fact that they're in a flock to keep them safe. So that's one of their methods of safety is, safety in numbers. Okay, this is my friend Daphne's feeder. And you'll notice that she too has some of the elements of natural branches and variety of heights and variety of food. And those are all things that's going to promote you having a variety of birds. So you'll notice on the top part there, she's got some suet feeders with several different types of suet. And there's also, if you look up at the very top, there's a strand of millet seed that is still attached. And that's just hanging up there for the birds to come and feed on. And also she has nice little open feeders. And one of the things I like about her feeding setup is that she has little covers for her feeders. Mine don't have covers, but I like that element. It does help keep the food fresh. So every time it rains, I have to go empty all my feeders and refill them. And for me, that's just part of the chore of doing it. But I think the birds like the cover as well. And often they'll come to them when it's raining and then they're not getting wet and they can eat. This was actually the other day when we had snow in my backyard. And this is a white-breasted nuthatch. And I included this picture because he's making use of my tube feeder. And I just wanted to kind of illustrate that different birds do like to use different types of feeders. And, he's a good example of that. This particular feeder does have little perches on the side. And a lot of the birds perch on those perches, but he actually crawls on the feeder and just grabs the food out, kind of like a tree trunk. And this is a very popular little feeding station that I have. And this little cup has a mix of the suet nuggets and the mealworm trail mix that I use. And you don't have to have a big, exotic setup to attract the birds. This is just a little glass cup and I have it stuck in a pot, but it's in a bush. So the birds come up out of the bush and come and grab the food. And it's a very popular feeder. This is that same feeder, and this is a western tanager coming in for some mealworms. And here is a bark butter. And the bark butter is really very popular. My summer tanagers love it, but also the yellow rump warblers can't get enough of it. And it's one of those feeding stations that there's almost always something there. And I have to refill that thing every day or two. So very popular. And jelly is another thing. That's one of the seasonal items. So I start feeding jelly in the fall and feed it through the winter. And I keep feeding it until the orioles leave and I don't have birds coming to get it on a regular basis. So Baltimore orioles love grape jelly. They also, you'll notice that that particular feeder has little barbs where you can stick oranges on it. And some people have really great success feeding oranges to the birds. I have not had great success with that. I've been to a house that had 40 or 50 orioles, and they had oranges just lining their feeders in addition to the jelly, and all of it was being used by those orioles. But when I put oranges out, what I find is that nobody really pays much attention to them, and they just go to the other food, and then I end up going and getting the oranges and throwing them away. So every now and then I'll feel inspired and go stick some more out there just to see if I get any hits on it. And you know, I think it never hurts to do that. With the jelly feeders at the house I live in now, when I first moved in, I came from an area where I had a lot of Baltimore orioles, and they would eat the jelly. Like every morning I'd go put it out and they'd be in the trees yelling at me, going, "Give me my jelly." And, you know, within hours it was gone. When I moved to the house I live at now, I'd put the jelly out and nothing would come. And I kept trying, and I was just, you know, it was basically just a chore and a waste. And so I decided I wasn't going to do jelly anymore, and I skipped it for quite a few years. And then I decided, well, I'll give it another try. And I was really glad that I did. I got an oriole pretty quickly, and then I had more, and then I ended up getting a Bullock's oriole, which is a pretty good rarity. And the Western tanager also does like the grape jelly, and the summer tanagers go to the grape jelly. And they're not the only ones. There are a lot of birds that visit the jelly feeder. Here is a yellow-rumped warbler, and these guys like a lot of food. I mean, they pretty much come to almost anything you give them. I have one that goes to my hummingbird feeders, but they do also like the jelly. And here's a northern mockingbird at the jelly feeder as well. And gray catbirds also love jelly. So it does feed a variety of birds, and it just adds a different element to your setup. So I definitely encourage you to give jelly a try if you don't already feed it. Another bird that visits my jelly every year on a frequent basis is orange-crowned warbler. So you know, it's kind of a neat bird to have at a feeder. Here is one of the stacker rings, and this is a American goldfinch on it. And this particular stacker ring is one that's called Extreme Variety. And every now and then I get that just to kind of mix it up. I am a big believer that mixing it up, you know, providing a lot of variety does promote a lot of variety. And again, I really love the stacker ring. It's very low maintenance. There's not a lot to it. You just put the stacker ring on there, and eventually either they eat it all or it falls off or breaks apart. And then, you know, usually I bring the feeder in, give it a quick rinse and dry it off with a paper towel and put a new ring on it, and we're good to go. And so this is a feeding station at my house as well. And this just kind of illustrates how you don't really have to have some big fancy bird feeder. This was just a planter that I had that I have, there's a feeding station that hangs kind of above it, and food was falling in it, and the birds were coming to that planter on a regular basis, and I didn't have anything growing in there, so I just started putting millet in there, and it's very popular. And these are chipping sparrows, and I think, yeah, this picture was taken during one of the snow days. And here's that same feeder with a cardinal. And here's another feeding station at my house, and that is I have an area that I just throw the millet on the floor. Every morning I get a scoop of it. I pour half of it into that planter that is a feeder, and then I just throw the rest in a specific area in my yard. And I get a lot of birds just wandering around on the ground feeding, so you don't even have to have some fancy feeder. And this is the goldfinches. And this is on a thistle sock. And one of the things about thistle or Niger, it's called both, but actually I believe Niger is the correct term for this particular food. And my understanding is that it has to go through a mega heat process before it's allowed into the United States. I think they grow it in Africa. And so as a result of that, it does not stay fresh for a long period of time. And so I don't recommend going out and buying 40 pounds of Niger. What I often do is just buy these socks, which you can buy individually, and they're in like a sealed wrap. And then when they're empty, I might buy a small pack of the Niger and refill my socks. But usually I just buy new socks, and then they're fresh and new, and you don't have to worry about cleaning them. And then as far as the American goldfinches, this is what they look like by the time they leave. And here they're pictured in my peach tree, which that is actually another plant that really does draw the birds in. They love the peach tree. The flowers there attract a lot of different birds that like nectar. Okay, and let's see. So hummingbirds, we don't want to forget about hummingbirds. The recipe is really easy. Most of y'all probably know how to do this, but it's just 1 part water, 1 cup of water to 1/4 cup of sugar. So 1-to-4 ratio. And you don't want to use any kind of dye. Long ago, they encourage you to put the red dye in, but the birds don't need the red dye to come to the feeders. And red dye is really not good for us, and it's not good for them. And you just want to bring your mixture to a boil and then cool it, and then it is ready to use. You can also put it in a container and put it in the refrigerator and store it up to 2 weeks. You do want to make sure that you maintain your hummingbird feeders well. In the heat, they can start, getting bad pretty quickly. So you really want to change your food every 3 to 7 days. In the winter months, I usually tend to do once a week, I change the food. And then when it gets warmer, I try and do it more like every 3 days. So thinking of feeding the hummingbirds, this is a ruby-throated hummingbird at my house. And that is the hummingbird that most people think of in our area when you feed the hummingbirds. But I am always careful to mention to people that they are summer residents here. Some of them do overwinter with us as well. And over the years, there was an old wives' tale that if you left your hummingbird feeder up, the birds would not migrate, and they would stay because you left the food out, and they would then die. So for a good portion of my life, I did not put hummingbird feeders out in the winter. But then I learned that that was incorrect, and that, birds are pretty smart about that, all of that. Their instinct tells them when it's time to go. And having that food up can be very important, especially when they're migrating, because they may need to stop in somewhere and get a little bit of fuel before they continue on. Most hummingbirds have a pretty long journey when they migrate. And so that food can help them. But also, We have a variety of hummingbirds that overwinter here. This is an immature male black-chinned hummingbird. And currently I have 2 of them at my house right now. And they are only here during the winter. This is a rufous hummingbird. And in fact, this guy is at my house as well right now. And he has been here for, I think, 64 days today. And he'll probably be leaving soon. And this particular bird, this picture was not taken this year, it was taken last year, but it is the same bird because he's banded. And so that enables me to keep track of the fact that it is the same bird. And that's another interesting element about feeding, particularly hummingbirds. They have a very good memory. They can remember exactly even where flowers, specific flowers that have good nectar are. And, you know, this guy overwinters with me, and hopefully he will for at least a few more years. And this is a buff-bellied hummingbird, and this picture was not at my house, but it was in Leon County a couple of years ago. And this is another rare winter resident that you can get if you are feeding hummingbirds in the winter. And, you know, I encourage you guys to put up those winter hummingbird feeders and give the hummingbirds something to come to in the winter. It really does add an exciting element. I always, in the past, when I only had feeders up in the spring and summer months, I really looked forward to the ruby-throated hummingbirds coming. It was very exciting. Now I look forward to the winter, and I can't wait to see what winter hummingbirds I'm going to get at my house. So water is another very important feature, just as Veronica touched on in the beginning there. Providing a water source is one of the best ways to bring birds in. This is, I actually have a pretty big water feature, and this is a black-throated green-throated, what is this? It's a black-throated green warbler. And this is a bird that would not come to a feeder, but I get a lot of variety of birds that just come to my water feature. Now, as I mentioned, I have basically a pond and a waterfall and a pretty big water feature. But you don't have to have a super big setup. This is a plant that has the sprinkler going on it. And this is a golden winged warbler, which is, in fact, a pretty rare bird and definitely threatened status, if not endangered. It's definitely a more rare bird. And this was last year at my friend Daphne's house. She just turns her sprinkler on in the afternoon, and we sit and watch and see what shows up. And, you know, that's a great way to bring the birds in, either with a sprinkler or a mister. This is actually one of my favorite little watering stations at my house. And it's the stand to a bird bath that I don't even know what happened to the bird bath. I think it got cracked. But I still have the stand, and it's hollow inside, and it holds water. And it's nestled in the bushes, and the birds just love it. I see such a variety of birds at this little feeding or little water station. And, you know, as mentioned earlier, water is really a necessity, and it's a great way to provide for the birds. This is my peach tree. And this is an orchard oriole, which is another bird you typically would not see at a feeder. And it is coming to my peach flowers. Normally, I would definitely encourage people to think about native plants. My peach tree is, I'm sure, not native, but still very popular with the birds. But providing native plants can really make a difference. That's what's going to provide them with their natural food sources. So the food that we provide is a bonus, if you will. It's a buffet. But you know, without us feeding them, they're going to be relying on the native plants and the insects that come to those native plants. This is another element of just providing habitat for the birds. This is just sand, so play sand. And these two brown thrashers are taking a sand bath, and birds frequently do this. And it's an interesting behavior. And a part of watching the birds is really enjoying their unique behaviors. So with that, we think about spring and nesting, and you can actually buy little nesting material things that you can put out, or some people I know collect like dog hair and put that out for the birds. In this case, this little guy is stealing the fuzz out of my husband's grill cover. And here is a bluebird. She is just collecting up some grass in the backyard and taking it to the bird box. And so that's another aspect of, you know, maybe not feeding the birds, but attracting them and having them in your yard. It's, you know, brings a lot of joy to watch them make use of a nest box. And I just love every element, even just watching them make the nest. So I've mentioned a couple of times, you want to make sure that you really do provide a good variety in your food, in your feeders, different shapes, different sizes, different kinds of feeders, different kinds of food, and at different locations, at different heights, higher, lower. You want to make sure that you provide a safe haven for the birds by providing some water for them and natural food sources. And with that, I encourage you to, if you haven't, to please consider giving up the pesticides. If not altogether, at the very least out in your yard. Personally, I don't use any pesticides at all in my house, in my yard, anywhere in, you know, my property. We want to really promote the insects thriving, because that is a part of their natural food source. It's a part of the habitat, the environment. The frogs and toads rely on those things, and it's all a part of, you know, the food chain, which I'm sure we all learned about in middle school, but it is applicable. It's, you know, important part of feeding the birds. And this is a yellow warbler who is just rummaging around, thinking about, I'm trying to think of what the word was that Veronica used as far as the neatness of the plants. We don't have that at my house. I wouldn't pass as a government building. I like to let the weeds grow. I always participate in, I can't remember which the original was, No Mow March and No Mow May. At my house, we have a rule that in months that begin with M, we don't mow. And we let the weeds grow up and let the insects thrive and the pollinators have some natural food sources. And all of that contributes to what birds are in my yard. For example, flycatchers, they're not going to come to any feeder that you put up, but they are going to come and eat insects, but only if you have them. And you know, if you're using pesticides, then potentially you're poisoning the birds, because they don't know that those insects have been poisoned by pesticide. And the same is true also with rodenticides. That is a big problem in some areas where there are rats and they're using rodenticide. The owls in particular are hit hard by that. some of y'all may be familiar with. There was a northern hawk owl, or Eurasian flaco. So you don't know the story of Flaco. Flaco was a Eurasian hawk owl, I believe. And he lived in the zoo in New York, and someone busted him out. And he was, as they put it, living his best life. Flaco was seen all over New York, and people would, share Flaco sightings, and he was a celebrity. And he lived that way for maybe even a year. It was a pretty good while. And then ultimately what happened was Flaco ate a rat that had been poisoned by rodenticides and was killed. So, the things that we use in our environment can be far reaching. And I am going to leave you with this, if I can figure out how to make this work. Noelle, can you make this video play? These are my dogs, Lily and Ruby. There we go. And this is just a little video I'm going to leave you guys with. It's the blue jays coming to get their peanuts. At my house, we love to go and put a handful of them out and then just sit and watch the blue jays. So while you guys enjoy this, does anyone have any questions for me? Yes. Yes, ma'am. You definitely want to cut them in half. An interesting aspect of that is that I have orange trees in my yard, and the Baltimore Orioles do seem to love the orange trees, but I think it has more to do with the fact that they're evergreen and they're like really have thick leaves on them. Yes, ma'am. Just the cheapest grape jelly that you can get. At one point, I got the kind that was in the squeeze bottle just for simplicity's sake, but ultimately, I bring the little jelly cups in every morning and wash them, and so I just get a jar of cheap grape jelly and put a spoonful in each one and put them out. Anyone else? Oh, yes. Ah, that's a great idea. So, okay. So that for the people who are on Zoom, I'll repeat that comment. Jim was just commenting that they write it on their calendar when they have changed their hummingbird food as well as their oriole food, so that they stay on schedule of keeping it fresh. And I do it on my day off. So, all right. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope that you guys got something out of it. And, if you guys haven't, I hope you join us on some of our bird walks. I also do want to mention that when we're done here, I'll be back out front selling our t-shirts like the one I'm wearing here. They're $25, and the money does go to Audubon. It helps support the different things that we do. So thank you all.